Well, hello everybody and happy Monday. I hope you've all had a wonderful weekend and welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa, where we just have the bestest fun. So, amidst some tough topics, that's for sure. So, it's always cool to have our regulars in the chatty tat tat and beautiful Brice on a marvelous Monday. Welcome, Brice. How are
I'm so
you?
good. Let's pray because Wednesday I got listen, y'all people who live in cities, you can understand. We have had this construction literally 10 feet from my window for over a year now. And these people piss me off because I can hear it before the internet cuts out because they start this machine, this rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat machine. They're building a skyscraper of these condominiums that are millions of dollars. They're like, who the hell can afford this? So I apologize. I got cut out on Wednesday because of this. And so fingers crossed, I don't think it's going to happen today because they've been pretty quiet today. So fingers crossed that these damn construction work. You know what else they do, Shanti? For all the dog owners out there, this will piss you off. They drop their lunch trash in our parking lot. And it was only noticed because we let our dogs out and our dogs are getting into like their freaking McDonald's. Who
Oh
does
my
that? Who
gosh.
drops their trash in somebody's parking
Yeah.
lot? So
Yeah.
disrespectful. Anyway, so I'm so good. I was
Well, listen, I saw some shenanigans going on in Atlanta, by the way. I just happened to see something, I do
which
believe it was
ones?
probably Instagram, and cars driving up and down and crashing into each other.
Drag races. They have drag races,
No,
you guys.
it was in the middle of this looked like it was in the middle of the city. It was
Oh
cops and I
yeah,
don't know what was going on.
Atlanta is
So is
funny.
that
I think
normal?
this is true about a lot of cities. Like, I always forget how big Atlanta is because I stay in my little neighborhood. I live in Midtown and our shawl is in Inman Park. So we just kind of stay in this little area. And then we'll have to go do something in another area of Atlanta. And it never fails. We'll be in the car. Both my boyfriend and I, we always forget how big this city is. Like, there's so many neighborhoods and there's so many shit. We are we're called Empire State South because we are the New York City of the Southeast. And there's no telling. There's really funny Instagrams you can follow about Atlanta. There was this one video of this guy on a cardboard box with his dog pulling him, and it was like, this is how we snow sled in Atlanta because we don't get snow down here. It's just like, there's some rough areas. I mean, we have a lot of gangs here, and yeah, so Atlanta's a fun. It's a fun
Lots
town.
of haunted places as well.
We've
Creepy,
got the
creepy
CDC's here.
things.
The Coca-Cola is here. I'm telling you, I want to do a whole thing on underground Atlanta. It's crazy. Oh, Cassandra, you live in Carrollton. That's very close. Yeah. Atlanta's funny. It's a big city, but it's also still got a southern twist to it. So you still got the southernness as well, but it's definitely a city. It's a driving city though because it's too hot here to get into the. We have a subway system called MARTA, but it is way too hot to be like 6 feet underground. Um, is way too hot, so everybody drives here. But I have to say, I have to laugh because this is one thing that I love about my life in particular, is I always end up making lifelong friends with people that I work with. And I have to say, Shanti, we were chit-chatting before we went on, and you go, I have no idea what we're doing today. I'm just trusting, and you hit play. And I have to say how much I appreciate that because literally, and I think this with our audience too, like how close we've all gotten, through this, that we just trust each other now. And so I appreciated that. And I appreciate all the people that's here because we are going to have some fun today. We are going to
Well, I
laugh.
especially enjoyed it when you said to me, "Don't worry, it's going to be juicy." I went, "Oh, I like it, juicy and petty. I like it."
Well, that's
You
what
can
we
do
do
juicy
best,
and petty
right? We do best. We
for
laugh
sure.
at them. We laugh at them and we laugh at their pettiness and we laugh at how freaking ugly they are now because they're too freaking inbred to not be anything else but ugly, So that's what we do. We take their power away by laughing at them. So
For sure. So, hello, Lisa D. Hello, Cassandra. Hello, everybody. Nice to have you all here. So, I'm looking forward to hearing about the conspiracy, of course, of the sealed Borgia apartments.
so this
So,
is It's
Over
wild.
to you, Professor Brice.
Because the Borgia, you guys, y'all know, I've been saying like this Borgia crap's we're gonna be covering this for a while because it just gets better and better and better. I thought when we were gonna cover the Borgias that we would talk about Rodrigo Borgia and the Borgia Four, and then we would be done. But of course we're not done because the Borgias they're just the gift that keeps on giving. Like they just keep on giving us little nuggets. And before we move forward into their descendants, we have to talk about their apartments, the Borgia apartments at the Vatican, because y'all, they sealed these apartments after Rodrigo's death. They sealed them. And I think I sent you a picture, Shanti, of what the sealing actually looked like. And they were sealed for like centuries. Now I have some suspicions. I don't think they were sealed to the elite.
Eine Moment, bitte. Eine Moment. Or as the Austrians will say, warte bissel. Warte bissel means wait a bit.
Wait a bit. Wait a bit.
Okay, is this the one? I just want to make sure I've got the right one.
Yes. So you see how it says Alexander Borgia, which he was Rodrigo Borgia, but he was Pope Alexander VI. It was literally sealed, y'all. It was sealed, like WTF. And these were very elegant apartments. But before we get into them, guys, I just finished reading, and I have it on my phone here. I just finished reading The Borgia Bride, which I think I talked about, which is a fictional book, but it's based on Sancha of Aragon. And it was very fascinating to read. From a fictional perspective of historical events. And we don't know for sure if this is how she would have reacted or how, but it was very entertaining, especially knowing a lot about the Borgias. But there's an afterword at the back of the book. And I took a picture of this because I'm going to read this, you guys, because the afterword literally covers what happened when Rodrigo Borgia died. And we know that the historians say it was either malaria or poisoning. Either or, take your pick. I think it was probably poisoning. And so does she, because I'm going to read this to you guys. So this is kind of what was going on when they sealed the apartments. The details of Pope Alexander VI's viewing and burial are particularly gruesome. After his death, his body was washed and clothed and, following custom, put on display in St. Peter's so that it could be visited by the faithful. But as it lay in state, the Pope's body swelled monstrally and blackened, becoming so frightful in appearance that it had to be covered. The people began to murmur that Alexander had been possessed by the devil, or had at the very least sold his soul for temporal power. Accompanied by a small group, the body was swiftly carried away for burial to the capital of Santa Maria della Fabri, I don't know if I'm saying that right, where Alfonso of Aragon had been taken only a few years before. So Lucrezia's second husband and Sancha's brother. The actual interment was horrific. Alexander's corpse was so swollen that it failed to fit into a coffin and was literally beaten into. I'm sorry, I find this so funny. It was literally beaten into it with shovels.
I'm so disgusted. You see, this just shows you how warped your mind is. I mean, like, you think that's funny. I'm like so disgusted.
It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, y'all. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Talk about some effing karma. Like,
wow. I mean, like, okay, let me just understand this. Stop it, Brice. Why do they have like a ruler or a password or something?
Right? You're cutting out. Did we just pass piss the Aluma Shmati off because we're laughing at this?
Oh my God. But it's like, seriously. So he had these whole big coffin. He couldn't fit into his coffin, so they had to like pummel him in there.
His body got so swollen.
It's like shocking. Oh my God.
His body like pushing it. It's like, it reminded me of like, that drawer that's super full in your house. So you're like stuffing or you're sitting on your suitcase.
So why are they just like cremating him or something? I mean, that is like seriously
I don't know why they
good.
cremate him. I'm like, well, then that goes to the theory that he was poisoned. Because like,
Right. Okay, so I actually wanted to ask you on that though, because you said his body discolored. So they assumed that he'd sold his soul to the devil.
We're going to get into that because there's a character we're going to talk about that actually thought he was the Antichrist. I'm sorry. I just find it's so karmic that, so basically, yeah, he died and they put his body to lay in state at St. Peter's Basilica and it started swelling so bad that they had to cover it first. They just had to throw a sheet over it.
I'm trying to have my latte that I'm snacking, and it's not going down well right now. Thanks.
I mean,
that was my weekly cheat.
It sucks to be the Illuminati to have this happen to you. And so there was already this speculation that he was the Antichrist, which we're going to get into because this is on the precipice of the Protestant Reformation where people were starting to question the Catholic Church. But the fact that his body started to swell and discolor, they quickly had to like bury it because it started people really talking about him selling his soul. But the fact that they literally like had to beat shovels to get him to fit into his coffin, you know, and this is the wealthiest.
Was he like swelling all the time?
He was just swelling, yeah. And so they had to beat his body. I mean, it reminds me of like sitting on a suitcase. You know, you guys have all had to do that where you're overpacked and you have to sit on the suitcase. I mean, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. It literally couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, you know?
Can't get that picture out of my head. Moving swiftly along.
Well, all right. So they say, so let's go. So the actual interment was horrific. Alexander's corpse was so swollen, it failed to fit into the coffin and was literally beaten into it with shovels. A great stone was placed atop the grate. They had to put a stone on top of the lid of the coffin to keep it from busting open. I mean,
so and I mean, I'm sure like the stone wouldn't have stopped. The stone wouldn't have stopped it.
This is comic. I don't know. I mean, I think that they bury for nefarious reasons, but at this point, you would think that a logical person would be like, shouldn't we just cremate him? At this point, should we just burn him?
Well, exactly. Or like just put him on the top of the mountain and let the birds eat him or something.
Exactly right.
Like, please,
just back to God. So I just wanted to start that off with that, because that's historically what happened, you guys. And the fact that, I mean, of course, this is now we know, like, scientifically, and yes, we are the most woo-woo weirdo people you'll ever meet. I totally believe in spiritual, but we believe in all that stuff. But today's world in 2024, we can say, that might have been poison that made his body swell, right? You know, we can kind of still see the logic in it. But back then they were like, oh my God, maybe some of these detractors were correct. And maybe he was the Antichrist. And one of the biggest, so before we get to the Borgia apartments, there was this guy named Savonarola. I hope I'm saying that correct, you guys. I'm not Italian. Savonarola. Savonarola. And he was a precursor to the Protestant Reformation. He was born on the 21st of September, 1952. He believed the church was corrupt. He wasn't wrong. His teachings spread into Germany and Switzerland rapidly, greatly influencing Martin Luther. So we know, we're going to talk about this more next week when we get to St. Francis Borgia, one of the descendants. But the official historic start of the Protestant Reformation was Halloween Day of 1517, when Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of a Catholic church in Germany. Now, again, Martin Luther, like Savonarola, was not somebody initially who wanted to leave the Catholic Church. They just wanted to reform the Catholic Church. That wasn't their plan. And so even though we have this official start date of 1517, a lot of historians do believe that Savonarola was actually one of the starters of what would turn into the Protestant Reformation, which then gets into the lovely Schmesuits. I don't know if we can say that word on YouTube, the J word. So we'll just say the Schmesuits, which again, we're going to talk about next week anyway. But I thought this was really interesting. So now Savonarola hated Pope Alexander the Sixth. A lot of people did, in fairness. In fairness, that wasn't an unpopular opinion, a very popular opinion, because a lot of people hated him. And he thought he was the Antichrist. So whereas a lot of people hated Pope Alexander the Sixth and the Borgia family, they hated them for more practical reasons. Like, this is a crime family. They do things in very, they're not very honorable in their warfare, like, practical reasons. But Savonarola went deeper into this being the Antichrist. So he thought at this time they were looking at the world, right? Now, what's interesting about Savonarola, and even though I mean, Savonarola is not wrong, bless you, Shanti. Even though Savonarola is not wrong, I don't really like him either, because he reminds me a lot of like fundamentalist evangelicals today, where he's so hellfire and broom, like he's just so extreme in his beliefs as well that he actually scares me too. Even though we're not living in this time. Now, Savonarola was born to a wealthy medical family. He received the best education money could buy. So this was not somebody who was poverty stricken. At 23, he gave up all his worldly possessions to become a friar. And by the dawning of the Renaissance, he felt man had stepped away from God. So it was the Renaissance that, I guess, and looking at this from a very human perspective, there was a huge shift in consciousness. And again, guys, I'm talking about the official narrative. I've gotten this comment before, and I just want to clear this up so nobody leaves this comment down in the comment section. Shanti and I have covered Tartaria. We're very well aware that there's alternative timelines. Yeah? So you don't need to tell us that in the comment section. We know. However, for me specifically, and I think I can probably speak for most of you watching and for Shanti, we have to keep an open mind with everything. We can't be hooked up because we don't know what the truth is, right? And so we have to have our feelers basically in everything, and entertain everything attached to nothing. So with this story, and specifically, we are following the official narrative that they give us, because that's just what the story is. So with the dawning of the Renaissance, everything was drastically changing from the Dark Ages, right, to now this like age of enlightenment, this age of art, this age of abundance. And so from what I see from Savonarola, even though he came from a very wealthy family, and it seemed very human to me, this massive like leap forward for human consciousness in a lot of ways with the Renaissance scared him. Yeah. I mean, we talk about that today with AI. AI terrifies me, but are there places where AI could be beneficial? Could it be a social memory complex in the positive side? I don't know. It's the unknown, right? And so he freaked out. He totally had a dark night of the soul, because all of a sudden humanity, the world was changing. I'm sure there are people out there that when the first computer was created, people thought the world was ending. Right? And so that's very human, right? We can kind of like empathize with them.
At the end of 99, remember when 99 went into 2000?
Right.
Oh, God.
Yeah, what was that? Y2K? We thought, yeah. So you
guys. Y2K. So many people made so much money.
Yes. So we can kind of see, like, this was his Y2K. Like, he literally was like, oh my God, these people are painting naked women everywhere, and they're like reading poetry, and it's the end of the world. And, he really believed it. Like, he really got in his own delusions in that way, but we can understand it because we see that in our world too. This is not the first time that this has happened, and it's not the last time it's going to happen. And so he's I always laugh at this. He soon started claiming that he was getting visions from God. Now, I totally believe people can have visions and see other spirits. And Shanti, we've talked about this before. Positive entities are never going to interfere with your free will, and positive entities are never going to have you do anything that's going to negatively impact another human being or interfere with their free will. However, negative entities can disguise themselves as positive entities, can play to your narcissism and your ego and make you think you're an epic prophet.
It's a complete process. I mean, think about, how I love to see, because things will repeat themselves, but in different ways. Think about how a pedophile seduces a child. They know all the tricks of seduction. It's the same sort of thing, playing itself out in every area. You're going to get the one that's more powerful and more knowledgeable, and literally using the power of suggestion, if you will, right, to manipulate things as well. So yeah, it's powerful.
And they probably played these entities that he was seeing, because I don't doubt he was seeing entities. They were probably playing into his fear of the Renaissance, about what was happening culturally, and made him believe that he was right and that this was the end of the world. And it doesn't help that Pope Alexander VI was sitting on the throne of St. Peter at this time. And it wasn't just the Borgias, you guys. Like, they weren't the only crime family. We had the Orsinis, we had all these other, the Medicis in Florence. We had all these other crime families in Italy around him that were rising with the Renaissance. And so I can see how these entities, it's one thing to be apprehensive about what's around you, but I love the phrase, take everything with a grain of salt, because I think that keeps you grounded and able to recognize your own fears might be delusional. And I think he was unable to see that his own fears were actually a little bit delusional, right? And he wasn't wrong that Alexander VI was definitely part of this nefarious group and probably part of the entity of the Antichrist. He wasn't wrong in that. But he also, in my opinion, reading about his stuff, he also very much infringed, just like Alexander VI, just like the establishment, just like the Illuminati, he definitely infringed on other people's free will choices. And that's not right either, right? So you can't have, you can't be a hypocrite, and I think he was pretty hypocritical.
I think we all, and the interesting part about this is just to see how all of us go through this at varying stages, or maybe to varying degrees. All of us can be manipulative. I mean, show me one person here who's never been manipulative in their life. Me?
We're women.
and I'll show you a liar. Do you know what I'm saying? We all have tried to push the edge. We've all tried to get our own way. When you work with Caroline Mace's work, okay? Caroline Mace is a brilliant medical intuitive. And she speaks about humanity having 4 archetypes. We all come in with 4 archetypes, which is the wounded inner child, right? The prostitute, the saboteur, and the victim. And all of us, until we have healed our wounds as humans, because these are human wounds, we will always sell ourselves on some level. I'm not saying you're going to stand on a street corner, but you're going to compromise your values because you're going to think at some point you have to. All of us think that at some point, until you gain your core power. Then you realize you don't need to compromise, but you don't need to hurt someone else either. And that comes with wisdom. So it's so true, what you're saying. All of these things playing themselves out. But at the end of the day, who are we to judge someone when we ourselves have, it's a human condition. Yes, there's varying extremes. You can go to that extreme or that extreme. But hey, I'm a believer and I've lived many lives. I'm sure I've been to all extremes before.
I'm sure, and that's I joke about history being gossip, and it is, but it's also, we can learn from it because we can see the mistakes that these people have made, and we can observe that in our own lives and be like, ooh, maybe this is a good lesson for me in areas when I feel super triggered, to not be self-righteous, but to actually sit back in that and just reflect on it for a moment. And I've said that before. I've said it a couple of times this week, actually. wisdom doesn't come from leading the perfect life. Wisdom comes from making mistakes. And so, but unfortunately, Savonarola, I don't think he actually took the time to sit back and observe the hypocrisy of what he was doing. So, but nonetheless, you guys, so he started claiming that he was getting visions from God, that Alexander VI was the Antichrist and that the world was coming to an end. Now, it'd be one thing if he was just a crazy wackadoo on the side of the street talking to himself, but he actually had a following. He had a huge following of people that believed him, a little cult that was growing. And he actually did, when he left Florence, That's where he lived. And he went and joined like the French king when the French king was invading Italy to try to take over the Vatican. So he was doing some nefarious stuff against innocent people because they were coming into town slaughtering men, women, and children, to prove his point. Now he felt like Florence, Italy, was going to eventually be the new Jerusalem that's spoken about in the Revelation, as opposed to Rome and the Vatican. His first family that he targeted was the Medicis. You got to be an effing idiot if you're going to go up against them. I mean, that's like the Rothschilds today, right? You got to be really smart to be able to go up. So that was the first family he went up against. And he started having what's called the Bonfires of Vanity. So it just reminds me of the Protestants today. All the Renaissance painting of women naked. He would have
Yes.
doing these paintings. And, as someone who can appreciate historical art, it's like, why did he get rid of these paintings? Because they have historical value. But he had people burn these Renaissance paintings that he felt were way too scandalous.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Censorship, y'all. It's like book burning. Like, no. And I love it. I keep seeing this meme. After like lockdown, we got out of lockdown. People talked about how they understood why all the women in these Renaissance painting were fat because they had come out of the Dark Ages, and we just came out of lockdown and so many people got fat from like being in quarantine.
Yeah, it's super curvy chicks. Yeah.
I'm starting to understand why all the women in these Renaissance painting were fat because they had just come out of
round.
Which I thought was hysterical. But he was having these like vanity bonfires where they were like burning not just paintings, but like books written about like reason and consciousness that were kind of pulling away from mainstream religion. Because at this time too, the Protestant Reformation of what we're leading up to was I say this before, it wasn't really about religion. It was, but it wasn't. The Protestant Reformation was more about autonomy and sovereignty. More and more people in the Renaissance were learning how to read. For many generations before, the peasants couldn't read and they didn't know Latin. So they were kind of stuck in their own ignorance. But as we come from the Dark Ages into the Renaissance, more people, the level of education is growing. And so more people are able to understand and read what they're being told is not what they're reading. And so this collective consciousness of anti-establishment, which is what we're doing right now. It's no different, and so, for someone like Savonarola, even though he could have been a precursor, we lost Shanti, couldn't have been a precursor to the Protestant Reformation, he still wasn't willing to look outside of the confinement of black and white thinking, which is, guys, we just lost Shanti and can you guys let me know quickly? Can you guys still hear me? I don't want to just be talking to myself. I don't know if there she is.
She has appeared.
Okay, good. I was like, am I talking to myself right now? Because I do that sometimes, but I don't really
I close my window. They're just banging my blinds. So I just wanted to.
It's probably Savonarola coming back, having us try not to talk about him like this. Right. But yeah, he was very much focused on the end of times, as we see throughout history, fear, this fear mongering about the end of times. And on May 12th, 1497, he was excommunicated, but he continued to preach for a year afterwards, and he was executed on the 23rd of May, 1498 for heresy. And we can go deeper into that if you guys want to. There's definitely some parts of Savonarola's life that I do want to touch on in future episodes, having not to do with the Borgias, but just some stuff that they would do, like trials by fire. Have you heard of that, Shanti? Trials by fire?
I actually have, yes.
It makes me think a lot of what they do, what we hear they do in like the Illuminati. But basically, like if somebody claimed to be a prophet, they would have them do things like walk through fires. And if they lived and they were a prophet, but if they didn't, they would die. And yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff that they were doing to kind of prove that. It just shows you how much friction there was around Alexander VI. Now, with that being said, Savonarola was probably Alexander VI's even though Savonarola had a big group of going up against him, Alexander VI was so effing powerful because he was the Pope. You know, he was the kingiest of kings and he was the richest man in Europe, that, you know, Savonarola, I think for Alexander VI was more just like an annoying gnat, like flick it away, right? But nonetheless, it doesn't mean that Alexander VI didn't have ongoing issues with other people who just didn't like him. Like they didn't necessarily believe he was the Antichrist, but maybe just did not like him because he was an asshole. You know, you can not like someone for different reasons. And, you know, I do think there was concern. I do think the opposing crime families used this folklore about Alexander VI being the Antichrist to try to drum up support in taking down Alexander VI. And I do believe he was poisoned at the end of his life. So that does, you know, and that explains why so many people, when they went to go pay their respects to Alexander VI, when they saw him swollen, they were like, oh no, he was the Antichrist. He was possessed by demons, you know. And
but I mean, can poison do something like that? I mean, I'm interested, you know, because they were saying,
we're going to talk about this.
What type of poison are we talking? Do we know?
There was one type of poison. It starts with a C. I don't have it on me. Cantronella or something like that. That the Borgias were famous for using at that time. And we're going to talk about this next week too, because poisoning is a huge tool of the Jesuits as well. And some poisonings they use will make it mirror or mimic other sicknesses. So, yes, you know, women typically are the poisoners. If you look at how men and women kill, women are more typically known to use poison, which makes sense because women are, sorry to the woke people, but women are, for the most part, biologically weaker physically than a man. So it takes more of that subtle. If they want someone dead, it's going to be more in a subtle way, like poison, than full out.
Isn't it interesting? And it's true. Statistics have shown that if women commit suicide and also if they kill, or, you know, like you say, they'll generally go for the more depending, I guess, the non-violent, which is the poison. So they don't see, it's not the physical, you know, blowing up or whatever, you know. So they'll often go for stuff like that. And if they shoot themselves, they will shoot themselves through the heart and not the head.
Oh,
it's very interesting that.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I know that psychologically, generally speaking, men kill to keep, like they kill to keep somebody. Women kill to get rid of. So even psychologically, there's a difference in why they're doing what they're doing. So, but with that being said, that doesn't mean necessarily that Pope Alexander VI was killed by a woman. You know, with the Pope, he's got so much protection around him anyway that it really would have to be poisoning, because it can get into the food. It's easier to do that than to have a sneak attack.
Lisa could not resist.
Yeah, nothing's going out. Well, obviously with Alexander VI, y'all, you had to, y'all, there must have been some freaking fumes coming off of that body. Can you imagine how
no, stop it. Stop it right now.
If I could go back in history and be a fly on the wall, I want to go back and watch them beat his body into the
I do not. No. I don't ever want to think about that ever again. I don't want to know people did that to him.
It's like a freaking pinata. He was going to burst out.
No, stop. You have to stop. No, you have to stop now. You have to stop.
Again, I'm going to reiterate, it couldn't have happened to a better man. It could not have happened to a better man. So let's talk about these Borgia apartments. So again, at the end of his life, which was like 1503 is when he died. All right. So what the Borgia apartments is a suite of rooms, in the Mercury retrograde, apostolistic palace in the Vatican. So this is the home of the Pope. And for those that are Protestant, again, this is such a foreign world. I've been to the Vatican, and I'm going to tell you guys, I cannot remember if I went to the Borgia apartments or not, because they're open now to the public. I might have gone, but at that point, y'all, the Vatican is super weird. If you're in the Vatican City, like, he's super creepy in there. It's beautiful, you know, and you have to cover your shoulders and you have to kind of go through a checkpoint because it's technically its own country. And I went I was with some girlfriends on like a trip. It was like a girl trip. This was like back in 2015, I think was the last time I was in Rome, 2015, 2016, something like that. And we went on a tour with a tour guide in the Vatican. And it gets, for me, and of course I am sensitive, like Shanti, like a lot of you, I am sensitive to energy. It was really exhausting, even though it's not that big of a place. I remember being really tired when we were done. You know, of course, I remember the Sistine Chapel. Like, that's like one of the last stops. I absolutely remember the Sistine Chapel. You also have security guards everywhere. They don't want you taking pictures. You know, again, this is where the Pope lives. And again, it's not that big. And so they're having to really screen people before they let them in. At this point, if I went back, I don't know if they'd actually let me in because of my YouTube channel, you know? So I can't actually remember if I went to the Borgia apartments or not, which is so weird because I've always been obsessed with the Borgias, but it was my mind was so foggy by the time that we left the Vatican that I just don't know if I was there or not. But if you've definitely been into the Borgia apartments, let us know. Because, okay, so this is the home of the Pope. These are apartments, offices, their own chapel. This is also where the Vatican Library is, and the secret Vatican Library, and of course the Sistine Chapel. Yeah, there's paintings, and so the Borgia apartments themselves were filled with paintings and frescoes created from 1492 to 1494 by Pinturicchio, which was the nickname of a very famous Renaissance painter, which means little painter. So during the first part of the Borgia's reign, obviously it was huge, because quote unquote America continent was found in 1492, right? The same year that Rodrigo Borgia was put on the throne, St. Peter's throne. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, was the same year that Christopher Columbus was doing his shenanigans. Now, there are 6 rooms in the Borgia Tower, and in the apartments. And this is the room. We'll get into some of these because there are secret rooms, the liberal arts room and the saints and the mystery room. All right. And these were 6 secret rooms where Alexander had his master of ceremonies do rituals. And of course, the room of the pontiff is just his bedroom. And honestly, that's the most boring room of it all. I think he did most of his stuff in these other rooms. So after Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia died, Pope Julius II, who if you guys remember, there was a pope in between Alexander and Julius that was in favor of the Borgia, but he only lived for 35 days. So Pope Julius II came in and he abandoned the apartments. Now, he abandoned the apartments under the guise that it was because Rodrigo Borgia was so heinous. But they're all heinous. So I think that's propaganda. I think that is not necessarily true. I think these apartments were sealed because they were going to be used to harvest more rituals. That's just my opinion. I can't prove that at all. Maybe our whistleblower friends would know more about this. But as you saw the picture, like, they really sealed those apartments off with all these really incredible frescoes that were still in there. Now, Julius II moved up to what they call the Raphael rooms. That's where he lived, which were above the Borgia apartments. Now, in 1816, they actually went in and removed some of the paintings in 1816. So according to what they tell us, from 1503 to 1816, these rooms were completely sealed off. No. I don't believe that for a second. They were being used. They just weren't being used in public knowledge, right? There was secret stuff happening in those rooms. And we'll get more into that next week too, with what was going on with the Jesuits, and further down the line with the New World Schmorder and the Illuminati and all the stuff that's happening as we roll into our modern times. Now, in 1889, Pope Leo XIII restored them and opened them to public viewing. We love us some Pope Leo the 13th because he was the one that also opened up the secret library and let the historians come in. And one of our historians went straight to the diaries, and that's how we know about the two. So we love us some Pope
Are you sure it wasn't you? Are you sure it was not you?
It might have been me in a past life. But I see it today. It must have been a gay man, because women, of course, women weren't doing this. Silly women. This was not women's work. Some gay man historian probably was like, you guys can check out the religious scriptures. I'm going to look at the diaries. I'm going to go look at these diaries. And he probably opened up that diary and it's like, y'all ain't going to believe this. You got to read this.
I'm going to get me some tea.
Like, this is juicy. And then Pope Leo the 13th was like, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't have done this. But he opened it up to public viewing at that time. Now, the interesting thing about the artist who did the frescoes in the Borgia apartments is that when the Pope died in 1503, unexpectedly, when his body bloated, this particular Pinturicchio, this particular fresco Renaissance painter, fled Rome, fled. So methinks that he was also involved in something if he fled the minute the Pope died. And all of the rest of his work that wasn't complete was left to Michelangelo and Raphael, which we know them way more than we know Pinturicchio, right? So I thought that was very, very interesting. Now, something that's super interesting in these, let's go through some of these rooms. So the main room was frescoes of the 12 depictions of the Old Testament stories. These were the prophets, and the word they use actually means priestesses or oracles in ancient Greek. On the ceiling, there were 7 planets pulled by the animals that represented the zodiac. And the 7 planets themselves were designed in Roman deities. Okay, so we know that Jesus is Zeus and the Dionysian, so this makes sense to me, that these frescoes are literally telling us the truth about this manipulation, okay? Now, the Room of Creed is interesting. We know the Apostles' Creed, which is the symbol of faith. And I'm going to read you guys, if you don't know the Apostles' Creed, we had to say this every Sunday in church. And I used to ask my mother, because we would have to say in church, I believe in the Holy Catholic Church, which growing up as a Presbyterian and especially as an American, we were taught that our ancestors fled Europe because they were Protestants. And the Catholic Church was like killing Protestants. So I'd ask my mother, why are we acknowledging the Catholic Church if that's not a part of our heritage? And my mother would just dismiss it and say, oh, we're just venerating where it started. Well, now when we get to the Schmesuits next week, no, it's because the Protestants eventually took the knee to the Catholic Church as well and became agents for the Schmesuits. So let me read the Apostles' Creed in case we have people who did not grow up Christian. And this is what this room, though, the Room of Creed was about. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived of the Holy Spirit and born of the Virgin Mary, who suffered under Pontius Pilate, who was crucified, dead, and buried, descended into hell, rose again from the dead on the 3rd day, ascended into heaven, and is seated at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty, who will come again to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sin, and the resurrection of the body and life everlasting. Now, this creed is allegedly was started in the 5th century. And with this creed room, it was also, the ceiling was decorated in geometrical figures. Now, there's a lot we could dissect with this creed that I have a lot of problems, especially resurrection of the body. There's actually, in the documentation from the Mu, the Lost Land of Mu, which we've talked about, they talk about in the Tibetan literature how Yahshua would argue and say reincarnation. At one point, they believed reincarnation was literally the molecules of your body coming back to life, which Jesus would say, or Yahshua would say, no, it's your spirit creating new life for a new existence. And so this resurrection of body also is huge in black magic and witchcraft, right? Because when a body dies and the soul leaves the body is an empty vessel. And so if you resurrect the body, they actually, funnily enough, you guys, season 3 of American Horror Story, they show this. They resurrected dead bodies and they put spirits into them. This is why I believe it is customary. Yep. This is why I believe in most churches it's customary now to bury bodies versus cremate them. You know, in like the Eastern culture, they cremate, and I want to be cremated because I don't want my body being used for anything other than the life it's supposed to
They
live.
can only use them, from what I understand, they can only use them for a certain time.
Yeah.
They can only use that cadaver for a certain time.
Yeah.
It's got to be quite fresh.
Not like Alexander the Sixth. They were like, oh shit, we can't use this guy. No, it's interesting. The Cassiopeans just released a new reading and they talked about cloning as well. That the only people who can actually be cloned are people who are organic portals, who don't have souls. A souled being's body can't actually be cloned. So that's interesting as well. And so there's so much to this creed that we could pull apart and dissect, because to me, this is like a spell. This is like a spell. I mean, we would say it every Sunday. It's like a spell. It's programming, it's indoctrination, right? So the room of liberal arts was another room, and this was the 7 liberal arts, which was grammar, rhetoric, logic, geometry, arithmetic, music, and astronomy. And each of these 7 liberal arts in this room was drawn as a celestial woman, which is interesting. And that there was a justice on a throne in these paintings that was also depicted as a woman, which is very interesting for that time. Now, interestingly enough, too, in 2016, restoration on some of this artwork in the Borgia apartments began. And they uncovered a damaged painting of the resurrection that illustrated Native Americans in Europe. Now, I think I sent you a picture of that, Shanti, of the Native Americans in Europe. And this has really fascinated a lot of historians. Yep, there we go. Because America, the continent of America, had traditionally just been found. Now, somebody commented, I thought this was interesting, that what if these Native Americans weren't actually in America? What if some of them were already in Europe? And that's why they have such a art collection of this. I don't know. It's just something to consider. Very wild, very interesting. Maybe part of the reason why they sealed the apartments too was because there was too much truth in these frescoes. I don't know. Now, the Room of Saints, which was a secret room, depicted the lives of the 7 saints in the Bible, which is Elizabeth, Anthony, Barbara, Susanna, Sebastian, Paul, and Catherine. Now, again, I didn't grow up with 7 saints in the Bible, so this was wild to me. But nonetheless, there you go. Now, again, I don't believe in sainthood because I don't believe that there are people that lives are more worthy than anybody else's life, right? I believe that I don't believe in prophets. I believe they're good teachers, but a good teacher knows that even though they're teaching a subject, they're not any more worthy to God, the creator, than the person they're talking to, right? And that's the so when we go into this like elitism where certain people are better than others, or certain people there's a pecking order, that's of the darkness.
Right.
So a monarchy,
Totally.
a church with a pastor or a pope, that's totally of the darkness, you guys. So on the ceiling, there was also the Isis and Osiris story. The Room of Mysteries was another room, and this was the mysteries of faith. So this is actually like Bible stories that challenge logic, right? So this room was like a room that would have been used for the general public to see the pontiff because it was the least harmless one. Like it was just the general Bible stories. And of course, the Room of the Pontiff was the bedroom. So I think I sent you, I don't know how many pictures. I think I sent you the Borgia Tower, which you can still see the Borgia Tower today.
Yeah, you sent me 4. So
yeah, so there's the Borgia Tower that is still there after all these years. And I think I sent one of just I think it's labeled just Borgia Apartments, of the intricacy of the frescoes that were in these apartments created by Rodrigo Borgia. It's like got a blue, let me see here if you can find it. It's got like its dominant color is blue, and you see gold on the ceiling. I mean, these paintings are unbelievable. There we go. Yeah. So you see the intricacy of these paintings. And to be honest, you guys, like I said, in the Vatican City, most of the rooms are like this anyway. I mean, the artwork in the Vatican is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. They're literally hoarding so much of humanity's history and the greatness of humanity in the Vatican City. You know, so and we know with art, like people who are artists, they put a lot of time and effort and a lot of heart into their work. And so that's obviously very energetic. And so that the remnants of that energy is probably still in there too. So yes, Cheeky Blue, you can actually go in. I mean, they do the Borgia apartments are open to the public at this time. But I would love to know, Shanti, from any of our whistleblower friends, if they know anything about the Borgia apartments or what was happening in the few hundred centuries when they were not in use by the public, or they allegedly were sealed because Pope Alexander
Just
VI.
tell me again, where exactly were they in the Vatican? They're in the Vatican,
They're in the
right?
Vatican, yeah. They're near the Sistine Chapel. They're attached to the Sistine Chapel. And they were sealed from 1503.
Leo Zagami would be a good one. Sorry, Brice. Leo Zagami would be a good one to speak to.
So
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. They were sealed from 1503 to 1816. 1503 to 18, that's over 300 years that they had those suckers sealed. Y'all, come on. They weren't sealed for 300. You can't listen. Have you ever like left your house for a week and you come back and you open it and there's a weird smell in the house because nothing's moved in a week? Can you imagine, like, if you just left there sealed for 300 years, those frescoes would have disintegrated.
It would be rotting. It would be rotting. But I mean, yeah, so people have obviously been in there, in my opinion, cleaned, preserved. I mean, it seems to be like something pretty dodgy. Yeah, I was going to say dodgy things going on there, because now we know. And you say 1816.
It's 1503 to 1816. They were sealed.
Yeah.
That's the story. And do they think we're stupid? Do they think we're stupid? Those frescoes would have started rotting after a year of that apartment being sealed. Do you know how many vermin were everywhere? How many rodents were everywhere at this time? They would have had rats eating at these frescoes. There would have been insects. Like, nature would have started to take over. Like, so you're telling me in 1816, they knocked open the ceiling and they pulled the frescoes out and started restoring them? Bullshit.
No.
That's
it would have been, especially for 3 centuries, you want to tell me there's going to be no major wear and tear to any of anything?
Right.
No.
I mean,
it would be obviously, I would say they're on a portal. It's obviously on a portal of sorts there, in my opinion. They would have. So for me, it's saying there's a portal there. I would definitely say some type of shenanigans going on there, rituals maybe, sacrifices. I don't know what these people do, but I don't like the feeling. And it goes down, down, down to the bottom. It's like a feeling of going down.
This is where the banquet of chestnuts happened. Was in the Borgia apartment, right? And you guys, that definitely was some satanic stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there was all time, and I know and obviously common sense would tell us that the entrance they sealed, even though we might think it's the only entrance, it's not. There are tunnels, there are other entrances. Of course there are into these apartments. I mean, again, do they think we're stupid? Like, of course there are other entrances. I mean, the Borgia Bride, even though it's a fictional book, was talking about all the different tunnels and passageways behind. I mean, think about it. Even let's just say, let's play devil's advocate, and let's say that the Pope is the most holy person on the earth. He is literally the embodiment of Christ. Let's just say he's the nicest, kindest little grandpa you ever met. And let's just say there are evil forces after the Pope. You can't tell me that they don't have escape rooms to protect the Pope if the Pope's in there, to get him out. They have escape rooms all over that freaking Vatican, to get these people out and away and into different rooms quickly. I mean, we're talking about a place that has a room called the
Seriously, I think all these tunnels find their way to the Vatican. Seriously, I think the Vatican is like the queen, when you're looking for an ant's nest or something. The Vatican is where the Queen Ant lives.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to talk about that more next week, you guys. I'm so excited about next week's episode. And I agree with you. And I think that it's interesting because I even go on. So basically when I research stuff, guys, like I first will go and look and see like what the mainstream narrative is. That's where I start. I always start with the mainstream narrative because then I know where to pick things apart. And then I go and look at different parts of the story to kind of see where I can find cracks in the story. And then I'll go on a separate server from like Google to see what I can find. They have literally scrubbed the internet. Like you can Google Vatican Borgia apartment conspiracies on like DuckDuckGo or a different server, and you'll see things pop up, and then you'll click on them, and there won't be anything there. They have literally.
Look at this! I love this. I mean, hey, never a true word spoken in jest. All roads make sense to me. I'm sorry, or it makes a lot of sense to me.
And some of those tunnels could actually, as you're saying, be tunnels of portals as well.
Well, if you look, if you listen to Caleb's stuff on the Shinkana, the Shinkana, I think, is it means the underworld, the place where one forgets oneself. It's the entire underworld system, is what they call in the arcane Shinkana. It's a Peruvian word, I think, if memory serves me correctly. And it is all about tunnels. It means tunnels, underground cities, underground whatever. It's the fallen, because Earth fell. We're living post-mud flood now.
Yeah.
So this is all, the Shinkana is literally what fell. So everything that fell is, and of course there are gazillion tunnels there. And yes, of course they have military bases, like for the town planning stuff like that, every city has, blah, blah, blah. Of course they have that. But beneath that, what we've been taught is the dams, these deep underground military bases. I'm not saying stuff like that doesn't exist, and tunnels to an extent exist, but the major tunneling is not the dams, it's the Shinkana. And it's these portals you fly in. Yes, it's not just because remember, Earth has 9 realms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not outer space, it's actually inner space where everything is. We're on the 3rd realm, but Earth has 9 realms. So basically,
it could be too, the Cassiopeians, people have asked them about like the alternative timelines and stuff. And the Cassiopeians have basically said all are true. Like all the timelines are true. You're just getting the dates of what's not right. And so I love this idea that even maybe it's not 300 years we're looking at. Maybe it's even longer or even shorter. And I love Jojo Awaken said, could they open them back up to suck up visitors' energy? Now, I agree with this. Now, I didn't know, because as I told you, I was exhausted when I left and I'm very sensitive to, I've learned that now. Like there are times I'll be somewhere and I just feel energy just draining out of me. And for a long time, I didn't know what that was. Now I know exactly what it is. I'm being fed off of at that time. And as an O negative, that is something I have to be aware of. And so I agree with you, Jojo. I think the reason why I was so tired and when I left, I can't remember if I saw, is because I think I was probably having energy ciphered off of me at that time as well. And I think there's some people, for some reason, I think some people feel it more than others. But that could be why they opened up the Borgia apartments back up again, was to cipher more energy from the unsuspecting public, and then at night when it's closed,
that's exactly what they do. When Jesse was actually mentioning Neuenstein Castle in Germany is one of I think it's one of 3, if memory serves me, Queen Mother of Darkness castles. I know the main one's in Belgium, but Neuenstein, and she would say, they let visitors in there. And people can go and check out the castle and what have you. And that's really because they're feeding off the energy. They're siphoning energy. That's what
think about all the places in America that are open to the public. The White House, you can get an approval to go tour the White House. You have to go through a background check, but you can tour it.
There's an entire Harry Potter theme park or something in Florida. Did you know that?
No. Where? I'm gonna look that
I
up.
I do believe it's in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. I saw someone go. There's an entire Harry Potter theme park with all
It's
the
in
rides.
Orlando. They have one. It's the
Orlando.
Wizarding World of Harry Potter. It's in Orlando, which is where Disney World is as well. They also have one
Yes.
in New York. They also have one in the UK. They also have one in California. And they also have one in Japan.
And we know how they've used Harry Potter. Wow.
Now, Florida's
I didn't know.
interesting. We can talk about Florida, doing deep dives into Florida at some other time if you guys want, because there is a beach, Siesta Keys. It has been voted one of the like best beaches in America. And you know, a key is basically an island, and the Florida has a bunch of keys off of it. So does South Carolina. And so Siesta Keys, though, out of all these little islands, the sand is actually crystallized sand. And there's a theory that it came from Appalachia. But why did it come to this particular key and not the neighboring keys? And so my boyfriend actually thinks, because he's from this area, he thinks it's left over from Atlantis. And I mean, it's the sand. So it's interesting to me that Disney World and now your Universal Studios, being Universal Studios, where it's interesting that that's in Florida, and Orlando is relatively close. I mean, close for American standards. America's so big, we think close is like 2 hours away, right? To Siesta Keys, where we have this power grid. Let me see if I can pull it up so you guys can see it. Siesta Keys. You guys can see the images.
Is it like the Harry Potter theme park? Is it just with rides and things?
Let me share. I'll share. It's not, I mean, for us, so with this, the Harry Potter's theme park and these theme parks being close to this area, I'll pull it up. You guys can see why I think they put certain places, certain areas. You see the sand is very crystallized. It's beautiful. I mean, we walk there every single morning when we're there, because when you're walking on this beach, you're walking on crystallized sand. And so if this is close to Orlando, it is close for American standards. It's close. And again, American standards, we Americans have no problem driving 10 hours to get somewhere on vacation, because America's such a big country. So I've seen that sandcastle, actually. We walked past it when I was just there. So it makes sense that they would put these theme parks in particular areas, because I think they're pulling the energy from what's already there, right? And if this is crystallized sand, that's just across, because Orlando's in the middle of Florida, right? And not much is in the middle of Florida. Like if you're going to live in Florida, you're not going to live in the middle of Florida. You're going to live on the coast, right? There's no point in living in Florida unless you're like an orange farmer or a horse rider. You're going to live on the coast, but you're so close that energy is obviously filtering through. And for me, things like Siesta Keys, this is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's healing, but they're using it for nefarious purposes, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can use it for. They've obviously realized the value of it.
Yeah.
And are making hay while the sun shines at someone else's expense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so I think if we can ask Leo Zagami, is that his last? He's the Orsini guy, right? Isn't he related to the Orsinis?
Yes, he was. Yes, he's part of the, as well as the royal bloodline. But Leo's a monthly guest on the channel, and he was part of the Italian Illuminati. Yeah, an Italiano, Leo. Don't you love his accent? Hey, Chantelle, how are you, my dear?
There is an hysterical couple I follow on Instagram. It's an American girl and her husband is Italian. They're young. They're like in their 20s, and she will film him trying to say like American things, and I die laughing because the way he says them, like one was over s'mores, and he gets so excited because he'll do things that are so American, but he can't quite say it. Is hysterical. He's adorable too. Her husband's adorable, but yeah, he won't understand like phrases we say, like, who cut the cheese? Like, she asked him that once, which means like who farted, and he's like, cut the cheese. Like he doesn't understand. And it's hysterical. So we love our Italians. So I would love to hear from him. Like, what are we missing with the Borgia apartments? Because they have literally scrubbed the internet of any type of information that leads to, I mean, we can make critical thinking assumptions over what they're doing, and I doubt we're far from the truth about what they're doing in these apartments. But and I also find it interesting that this was a Spanish family who obviously lived in Italy, and he was the Pope, but how much they venerated the Greeks. And again, we know that Jesus means of Zeus, and that it was a Dionysian cult where they practiced cannibalism and like schmorgies, we'll say, as in the banquet of chestnuts. And so obviously there's so much information packed in this apartment about the truth of what Christianity has turned into versus what it originally was. So yeah, I'd love to hear his perspective of these apartments.
Yeah, I'm going to ask him. But yeah, let's see what Mr. Zagami is prepared to fess up. Let's get him to fess up. Well, he's recently become an American citizen, so he's very happy. He's not awesome. Italiano.
Yeah, listen, be like, this little petty girl in Georgia. She's super petty and she swoops.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, he will definitely, I think, be able to spill some tea on that. He's well versed in that. So we'll be seeing Leo on Friday. Anyway, so I hope you all will be joining us on Friday with Leo's show. And I shall see.
How does he ask him how he feels about the Borgias too? Because the Orsini's and the Borgias were like, but then they like married each other. Then like, and they like married each other. So, yeah.
I'll ask him. More passionate Italian on an error once a month. We like it. We like it that way. Okay. Thank you, Brice. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on Marvelous and Magical Monday with lovely Brice. And we shall catch you again on Wednesday with Brice. We are going to spill some tea on Wednesday. Brice, do you want to maybe give a little preview of what we're up to? And by the way, I understand it's not preview, it's preview for those of you who think I'm saying that deliberately.
We have the whistleblower of all whistleblowers not the whistleblower of all whistleblowers in the occult, but the whistleblower of all whistleblowers in current affairs that agreed. I took a leap of faith and I reached out to her and I got a response, and she agreed to no problem, agreed to come on our show. She's the one that blew the whistle on the Gypsy Rose scandal, and she has taken a lot of heat for it. And she's coming on Wednesday to talk more about her journey of going up against the Blanchards and Gypsy Rose and this chromosome disorder. And thank God for her, because her research and her putting this out the truth has come out. I mean, the truth is coming out. This girl got away with murder, and it's not what we think it is. And so I am so excited to have her on Wednesday. I cannot wait. And she is a really good storyteller herself. She's got a podcast. If you guys want to, if you have any questions, it's the Good Wives Network is her podcast. You can look for the Gypsy Rose Good Wives Network and listen to some of her work. Her name is Fancy. And so she'll be coming on and giving us all the dirt on it's not the dirt, it's the truth, right? It's literally the truth. And I love her spunkiness. And no matter how much mud they fling at her, she just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And I think, like you and me, Shanti, from my perspective is, the more mud they fling at her, the more pissed off she gets, and she just goes harder.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think, and I think it is so important. And I was actually saying to someone the other day, don't you just love these internet detectives? Because you guys know, I've been following this, whenever I want to say it on air, I always forget. Chris guy, and he's who killed his pregnant wife,
Watts.
and 2 children.
Watts.
And Nicole, Chris Watts, yeah. So, because now there's more information again that comes through. We should actually do a show on that, because it's also a very well-known show.
Yeah.
That, and she has gotten away. Her father was sitting in the police station with her while she was being interviewed. Thank you, Mommy. What? Yes, perfect. Thanks a lot. So her father, this chick's in her 30s, okay? Why in God's name is the father included in her police interview anyway? And then he tells the police that they must not ask her leading questions. So he controlled the police interview completely. She got away, she's off. But of course you get the internet detectives that are like spilling. There's video footage that shows her at the house. They didn't even take her cell phone records. And that's what I'm saying. In my opinion, there was a lot of sex magic involved there. That guy was definitely spellcasted. She was after his blood for almost a year before she actually went to work at the company that he worked with. She was already sussing him out on the internet. And they say that he killed his kids as well, and he threw them in the oil tanks. But now information's coming to light that I believe she probably killed his kids. I don't think that he would have killed his own kids.
Yeah, well, you know what else is coming out to light now is Scott Peterson, the Lacey Peterson. People are starting. We thought he was absolutely guilty, and now it's coming to light that he might not be guilty. He might have had an affair, but that's not murder, right? So it's interesting that all this stuff is coming to light now.
It's so interesting, because it just shows you, when you think about the level of violence that, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen with wives against husbands, but it's generally done differently. A wife will usually get a hitman or something, or as you say, might get poison or something. But she'll generally get someone to do that job for her. But when you're looking at the level of violence that is so often perpetrated from husbands towards their wives and children involved, there's no ways that these people are not possessed. I'm sorry. Something takes over them that they do these things. And that's why I say with that Chris Watts, there's no doubt in my mind that Nicole Kissinger is she's definitely been SRA'd. Her father owns that police station.
Yeah.
Her father owns that police station. That's obvious. Why? Why does he own the police station? See, that's the stuff I want to know. And then, of course, Nicole, I am convinced she had him all hexed up. I am convinced of it. There's not even a question that he'd been hexed. Not that that's an excuse.
I know. We were actually talking about this, and I've had people tell me like what they do too. This is so gross. I think we've talked about this before. Is like they can cook their period into food and feed it to a man, and they become totally. It's easier than you guys think it is.
Your period blood is super powerful. I've known that for a very long time. Very, very, very long time. Yeah.
Could you imagine?
No one wants.
I would throw up just cooking my own period blood in food. Like I just like to feed it to somebody. Like that's that's what they.
It's common knowledge that it's used in the arcane. When they're doing sex magic, and when they're splicing and dicing, they'll take period blood, semen, and often tears, and then they would mix that, and they use that to concoct a lot of their concoctions. Not that I know what it is. I've just.
Well, and it shows you a lot of birth control actually stops periods now.
Yeah.
Why are they doing that? Because your womb and for women, your period, like that's important for your power, and so they're getting
depopulation agenda.
Yep.
That's why they keep certain bloodlines. It's a depopulation agenda. They're getting rid of more and more bloodlines, and let's see.
Absolutely.
Anyway, everybody, speculating as we do, which is fun. So I want to say to you, happy Monday. Enjoy the rest of your beautiful week, and have fun. I will see you, I think not tomorrow, Wednesday with Brice. Guys, Jessie is not on this week again. I'm just asking you guys to put out some prayers for her, please. That's Jessie for this week. And then Thursday, yes, I hopefully have Caleb. But as we do with Caleb, please we just check close to the time just to see how he's doing. Friday, we have Leo and Catherine. And yeah, fun week ahead, y'all.
Lots of exposing.
Take it easy. Yes, and we're doing cool things as well. And we'll be telling you more about that very soon. Okay, y'all. God bless you all. Take good care of you and don't be good now.